Second. And we are live. So, Rijk, thank you so much for joining me today to talk a little bit about the magic and the beauty of the Muratie Estate, the region that you guys are in, which is in the Stellenbosch region. We're going to have a little chat around the beautiful wines coming from the estate, the stories behind them. Obviously, you guys have a very deep and rich history. As one of I think you're the second oldest, if memory serves me, estates in the Western Cape region. But before we dive into that, if you wouldn't mind, Rijk, just giving a little description of who you are, what your role is on the farm, and who is Rijk in Walden Muratie?
Yeah, no. Warren, thank you. It's so nice of you to have reached out to us, and it's an honor to be on this little chat of yours and this platform. Look, I mean, yeah, my voice is a little bit gruff at the moment. I don't always sound like it, but I actually quite like it right now. So. But Muratie is, as you mentioned, we are one of the oldest wine estates in South Africa. If you think that our country was established in 1652.
Wow.
It was basically documented in 1652, even though before that there were quite a few people that rounded the Cape, such as the Portuguese and the Spanish and the English. But it was established in 1652. Muratie was established in 1685. So we are one of the oldest privately owned estates in South Africa. The oldest being obviously Groot Constantia, which is today government owned. But as a privately owned institution, we are up there in the top 5 as oldest. So having that as a starting point, we've really decided to embrace our history. You can imagine over 3 centuries plus how many people lived here. We went and did a proper research on the estate. We got a cultural historian from the University of Cape Town to do the research. He spent a year in the archives of Cape Town and came up with this phenomenal manuscript. Nice. So all the information I have and that I talk about on my journeys and tours and wine tastings is all true. It's not been scripted for emotion or whatever.
Right.
And so what I did was I, about 15 years ago, decided that we need to embrace this and we need to bring the characters that lived here to the fore. You quite rightly know that there are beautiful wines in South Africa. We all make good wines. But each wine is individual and each wine can tell a story. Stories are emotion. And the way we approach our winemaking here is absolutely with an emotional intent. It's not a big commercial venture. As I said, we're a family business. So I've embraced all the people that have lived here. So I'll talk about some of the characters as we go on. But Muratie is Stellenbosch based. So we are in the cradle. We all like to think that Stellenbosch is the epicenter of the wine industry.
Right.
There are newer areas as well, but I still think if people talk about wine in South Africa, Stellenbosch might be the first one that comes to mind. Right. So we are 7 kilometers out of Stellenbosch, and that is on what we call the R44, so we are really close to Stellenbosch. We're at the foot of this majestic Simonsberg mountain. The mountain was named after the governor Simon van der Stel, who established Stellenbosch in 1679. So this mountain, we're right at the foot of it, which is incredible. It's got its own microclimate. It's it's on a slope. Our lowest aspect is about 180 meters. The highest aspect goes up to 360 meters. It's northwest facing, which is ideal. Now, you can imagine that mountain has withered over millions of years. So all that mineralic soil, granitic soil, has come down the mountain, and we are sitting on top of that. So we've got these really deep soils called Table Mountain sandstone, or for our better lack of a word, we call it red hutton. Yeah. So the soils are deep and red. So when you put a bulldozer in there and you do your soil preparation, it is absolutely fantastic to see this earth. It's phenomenal. The smell, it's rich. And that gives our vineyards a beautiful time to basically plant themselves, their feet, get their roots to go deep down. And with the aspect, we have the sun coming over the mountain from behind it. And so by the time we get full sun, the heat of the day is not early in the morning, it's much later.
Okay.
So we have a slower sun penetration, but we have the UV radiation. It doesn't get as hot as on the other side of the mountain. So what we call our hanging time of our grapes, the time it takes for the grapes to ripen, we talk about phenolic ripeness, it gives us more time. So we don't get that short, sharp shock of intense heat where the sugars shoot up in the grape and the berry, and you then have to pick it, even though the skin is not completely ripe. So we are lucky. We're getting a much better phenolic ripeness only due to our terroir, our aspect. For us to, my winemaker and I, Hattig and I, for us to mess up the wine, it's only our fault because we are given magnificent grapes. And year on year, they're always fantastic. I mean, there are exceptional years sometimes when stars and the planets align. But as a dead cert, Muratie has always been known for producing, solid, beautiful red wines and fortified wines. So it's a given. The wines are great. Now the history for us, because of the establishment in 1685. That is where we start. And in 1685, the first owner of this estate happened to be a mercenary. It was a German soldier that left Europe because at that time, in about 1658, Europe was not a happy space. It was really poor. It was just coming out of a mini ice age, actually. The guys were killing each other. The religious wars were going on. So the Dutch East Indian Company, who started the Cape, were a very big seafaring and trading nation. Excuse me. So they were based at the Cape, and they needed people to come and help them here, basically for, let's call it protection. So these mercenaries came down to the Cape, and this chap, his name was Lawrence, strange name, Lawrence Camphor, and he was based at the barracks, in the barracks of the Cape, and that's where he did his job as a soldier. Along then comes a side curve, because while he's in the barracks, behind the castle, which the Dutch built, they had their gardens where they grew their vegetables.
Okay.
They had to supply all the Dutch ships coming from the Netherlands, rounding the Cape to go to the east to go and do the trade. But you can remember, those ships would never sail one at a time. They would go in a flotilla.
Right.
A flotilla would be between 10 and 12 ships, 200 folk on a ship. You're getting like 2,000 people arriving at the Cape to be fed and to refuel. So these guys would come to the Cape. They'd hang around here for a month, maybe 2 months. And that became a big problem for the Dutch here, because they had to supply the food. They could get the meat. They could trade with a local tribe called the Khoi. And that's how they did it. But the pressure was a lot. So sadly, what happened in that time, slavery, what I was saying earlier, was obviously on the go. And the Portuguese had slave trading stations in Brazil, and they were taking slaves from Guinea in West Africa, from Angola, from Madagascar, from Mauritius, and that was what was happening. That's a long topic about a willing buyer and a willing seller, but that's not really the important part. The beautiful story that turned out was a group of slaves were captured in Guinea and West Africa, and they were taken by a Portuguese slave ship on their way to Brazil in the Atlantic. Along comes the Dutch ship from Amsterdam or Texel down the Atlantic, and they stumble upon this vessel. They attacked the Portuguese ship and took the 240 slaves on board as hostages or as bounty. And by the time they got to Cape Town, only 120 of those slaves survived. And those slaves were now put into the dungeon of the castle, and they were then used to work. They provided work to work in the gardens, etc., etc. One of the girls on that boat had a little daughter in the slave dungeon. And when she was born, her name was given as a strange name, but is Ancella. Ansela, Ansela. In those days, as a slave, if you were born on the Cape, your surname was always Van der Kaap. Van
Oh,
der Kaap in Dutch, of the Cape.
yeah.
The little Ansela grew up, and when she was old enough, she had to work in the gardens. Now you've got your German soldier, lays his eyes on this young 14-year-old girl working in the gardens. He falls in love with her, and Lawrence then says to the governor, Simon van der Stel, I would like to be a free man, a vryburger, a free man.
Mm.
So the governor says, fine, I will grant you a piece of land, which was the first mountain farm, was Muratie.
Wow.
So that is in the year 1685.
Wow.
And he was given the instructions that he had to plant oak trees, plant vines, build a house, put animals on the ground, sheep and cattle.
Mm-hmm.
And then the most important one is he had to sow wheat. And that was the catch.
Right.
The law was, as you cleared your land, you could clear 4 acres for wheat, 1 acre for vines. And that is where they caught them with tax, because we know in the inventory, the first harvest he planted, he sowed 8 bags, he harvested 12, and of the 12, he had to give 8 back in tax. So he could only sell 4 bags. So that's how they got these guys to work for the government or the compagnie.
Right.
So Lawrence now is living here at Stellenbosch. And we are, as the crow flies, probably 38 kilometers from Cape Town.
Okay.
Directly northwest. If you go from Muratie, you head northwest, you walk for 35 k's as the crow flies, you will get to Cape Town. But in those days, the destination to get there was marshy. There were wild animals, elephant, rhino, buffalo, anything you could think about. They were roaming free. So now Lawrence had to negotiate a 3-day journey on foot to Cape Town to visit this little special girl, Ansela.
Wow.
And in those days, the governor and they had a situation where all the slaves were allowed visitation rights in the slave house until 9 o'clock at night. And then they would ring a bell and the non-slaves were then asked to leave.
Yeah, yeah.
So Lawrence did this journey from 1685 until 1695. He would walk to Cape Town.
That's
In the meantime,
that there is
exactly.
proper.
And if you go back and you look, it's interesting that there was quite a lack of females in the Cape. So there was a lack of women. So it's another chapter for conversation, but it was not frowned upon for a soldier or anybody that was living in the Cape to have a relationship with a slave. It was not allowed.
Right.
So Lawrence then eventually, with long trials and tribulations, and Ansela managed to go to the governor, and the governor said to her, if you can get yourself christened and you become a Christian, then first and foremost, you will have some right to self-determination. Secondly, if you could learn to speak fluent Dutch, that gives you a good position. And thirdly, if you can prove to me that you would not be financially dependent on us, the company, then we can set you free.
Amazing.
So she did all those things. She got christened, and then a week later, actually on the 28th of June, 1695, she was given her freedom. And Lawrence fetched her in Cape Town at the slave house and brought her to Muratie with 3 kids by now. And they became the first rightful owners of Muratie. Now, in that whole story in its own, it's a novel, it's a movie.
Yeah, that sounds like a Hollywood sort of production.
I've had a script writer approach me.
Yeah.
But we just have not managed to work out the copyright and how to manage that, because it's a true story.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what I've done now is Lawrence. We've made a Chenin Blanc in memory of him.
Yeah.
The Muratie Lawrence is a Chenin.
Yeah.
And excuse me, our Bordeaux blend, which is Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, is this magnificent one. Yeah.
Yeah. I drank some of that probably about 2 weeks ago. It's a phenomenal wine.
Yeah. So I've named that in memory of Ancella.
Mm.
And then on the back label, there's a heart, and then there's a love story about both Lawrence and Ancella. So the Ancella van der Kaap for me is arguably it's the best
It's really good.
picture,
Yeah.
footprint of the history of Muratie itself. So they lived here. They were the first owners, and Lawrence passed away in 1715, and then Ancella sold Muratie in 1735. Just to give you a quick idea, she sold the farm for 2,500 Dutch gulden. That was the currency.
Yeah. Yeah.
To put it in perspective, a mercenary was earning 25 gulden a year.
Wow.
So she did quite well for herself from where she came from, you know. So she, as a slave who was emancipated, to end up selling her property for that kind of money, it was quite a job.
Rags to riches story, really.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
True rags to riches. The name Muratie. Can you talk a little bit about where the name comes from?
Yeah, so there are two. So right in the beginning, when the governor granted the land, it was in the title deed. It's written as in Dutch, the drie sprong. Drie sprong is a place where three roads diverge from the drie sprong.
Okay.
So it was always known initially as the drie sprong.
Okay.
The word Muratie only comes in about 1909 when they changed the name on the title deed, because at that time Muratie, or in Hollandish Muratie. Muratie in Dutch means ruin.
Okay.
The old initial house, which was built by Lawrence, still stands here today.
Wow.
It's now an art gallery.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time in 1909, the house was quite run down.
Mm-hmm.
So the landmark was called the Muratie. So when Colonel Stanford bought Muratie, or the Driesprong, they changed the name to Muratie.
Got it. Okay.
So it's not to be confused with the cigarette in Italy called Muratie, which is T-I.
Oh,
It is T-I-E. Yeah. So, and it's a lovely name because I find you can pronounce Muratie in German, in French, in English, any language. It rolls with the tongue. And American, it runs.
which is different to English.
Yeah, it runs with the tongue quite well. So the name Muratie only came about in about 1909.
Okay, so it's more recent. It's more recent.
Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, that history I wasn't aware of, and it's just amazing to hear those stories. I often believe, everybody talks about pairing wine with food, and which is the obvious one, but pairing wine with stories is really where it starts becoming really rich, and you understand the background. I even sometimes go as far as to say pairing wine with the arts and music as well as kind of the ultimate,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
story, the arts, the music, the food. But that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the estate itself? What you've talked about the terroir, you've talked about the climate, which is great, and the history. But what's there today? Is there you also talked about the vines where they are, but I'd been there, so I can picture in my head, but some folks haven't. So you've got the property, and then you've got these beautiful buildings as well on the property, and then you've obviously got just gorgeous surrounds. Can you describe that for us? What's there today?
Yeah. So the beautiful thing about this place is that more with a history as well, because between 1926 and 1987, there was one family here, a German family, Canitz family, that lived here. The old man, George Paul Canitz, was, I wish I'd met him. He was an artist.
Yeah.
He was a raconteur. He was flamboyant. I'm not going to say he was a womanizer. He was just, people loved him.
Yeah.
He had a flair. I mean, he was a marketer par excellence, and he just had it. I mean, he was brilliant. So he passed away in 1958. Then his daughter, the spinster, Alberta, she took over the estate. She did not want to change anything on the estate. She wanted everything to stay the same way her father had the place. So from 1958 until 1987, nothing changed here. Right. She actually locked his art studio. She locked his little chapel, his drinking room. She never went in there again for the whole time she was here on her own. So that held Muratie in such good stead because it was caught in a time warp. So when we came here in 1987, she sold the farm to my late father because she knew my family, the Melck family, farmed Muratie from 1763 for 120 years.
Wow.
She knew that. So she said to my father, you take it back on one proviso. You continue farming this farm in the same tradition as she and her father had done. And my father and mother said they would honor their wish. So this has given me the most phenomenal stuff to work with here. I've got, as I said, buildings from 1685. The next manor house was built in 1755. I mean, that's my mother's 92. She still lives there.
Wow.
Adjoining that is what they call the Jonkmanshuis, is where the son would live. I live there. The cellar on the other side. The original part was built in 1700. We've added onto that. I've got an oak tree there that was planted by Lawrence and Ancella. That oak tree is more than 300 years old. I've got oak trees all around the property that are just, I mean, that already is not tangible in value. It's purely emotion and it's history. So I've got all that around me here. What we've done, as I mentioned earlier, I'm happy in my situation is that I see myself purely as the custodian of this place. I'm incredibly privileged to live here. I must have been a very nice person in my previous life to have been given this nice, to have been able to do this. So much so that, you know, in my real first life, I was a medical doctor for 25 years. And I left medicine in 2005 to come and do this because I felt this place needed a custodian and someone needed to live this place and to bring all the wines and stories to the fore. That's basically what I'm doing here. So by embracing that, we offer now, we've got a little farm kitchen here, a restaurant, but we cook simple farm food. If you want to have deconstructive food with foam and all that, don't come here. If you want proper food and you want to pair it with really good wines, we do that.
Amazing.
I've also embraced the sports side, the healthy side. So we have of the best mountain biking routes in the Cape that you sign up from our trail center. You can cycle in the mountain, you can trail run, you can walk. You know, we have embraced that. So a lot of people do that. They go and cycle, come back, have a shower, and then go sit down, do a tasting, have a lunch or whatever. So it's become quite a destination.
Yeah.
And for the cultural, historical people, we give them a history talk. If they are happy, they book, and then they come here, and it's a 2-hour session when I do the history of Muratie, which includes the history of our country.
Yes.
So I'm sharing all that along with the wines, and that's what we're doing here.
Amazing.
It's not just the wine, yeah.
Can we talk about the wine? I mean, this is.
Yeah, no. So you see, when I do my wine tasting with me takes like 2 hours because of the stories behind the wine.
You got so much rich, tapestry to work with to be able to tell that story. It's almost criminal not to do that if you just literally talk about the wines themselves. But but thank you for the background. Yeah.
So what happened here was there's a lot of stuff here, but I mean but on the white wine side, it's a long story, but I went to Burgundy and I worked for a family there in 1997 for a very old family with a wonderful old French man. I was learning more about Pinot Noir, and because a useless fact is that the first Pinot Noir South Africa was planted and made at Muratie.
Amazing.
First Pinot Noir.
It's great.
Pinotage comes from Muratie. They used the cuttings of Pinot Noir from Muratie to create the first Pinotage in South Africa. But that's just a sidebar.
Yeah.
So I learned to make Chardonnay with this family. So he forced me to come home and plant Chardonnay. So we make a small batch of Chardonnay, like 8,000 bottles. It's called, and the old man told me, go home, make this wine, name it after your daughter. So we created this Chardonnay called Isabella, which is my daughter. And I make it in the same style as what I was taught in Burgundy. So it's more on the mineralic side. It's in French oak, but it's not overly wooded.
Mhm.
We work more with the soil, the minerality. Also, everything here is handpicked on the estate, no mechanization. We don't use pesticides in the vineyards anymore for a while now. We use natural fermentation in the cellar. So this is naturally fermented,
Mhm.
all in French oak, but we also we don't go through the whole malolactic, the second fermentation.
Right.
So we have freshness in the wine. So Isabella is a kind of wine that's fresh, got good acidity. We have two different blocks. I don't pick them all at once. One block first for acidity, second block for fruit.
Yeah.
Bring them in the barrels, all French barrels, and we do the blend of those two in about 9 or 10 months after we've put them in the barrel. And style fresh, zippy for food. So there you must go for your chicken or your fish or whatever. So that's the one. And then the Chenin is something we started a bit later. I had to do something for Lawrence Camphor, the first owner. And there, our Chenin, what I do there is we've got, so the law in South Africa is the 85% rule. Has to be 85% of a varietal to have the varietal on the label.
Yeah.
So we tweak it. We have 85 Chenin, and then we have about 13% of Verdelho.
Interesting. Yeah.
And 3% Viognier.
Okay.
So it's really, really nice. It's a horrible word to use, nice. It's a complex wine. But again, vinified separately in second full barrels, natural fermentation. 12 months down the line, we do the blend. And this Chenin is also, it's a lovely wine. You can sit and drink it if you want to, but it's also great to be paired with something more spicy.
Yeah.
Spicy foods, wonderful, wonderful.
Chenin's just sorry to interrupt for a second. I mean, Chenin's an interesting varietal in the sense I left the Cape 16 years ago, and it wasn't such a big trend at Chenin at that point. It wasn't as much. I've seen so much more Chenin coming out of the region today than I did 16 years. It seems to be almost a sort of invigoration of this particular varietal coming out of South Africa at the moment.
Absolutely, but I don't know. I might date myself now, but I remember as a young student going to dive crayfish.
Yeah.
Coming back, putting the crayfish, in the seawater and boiling it to whatever, taking it out and eating it fresh on the beach, freshly boiled. Yeah. What would you do? We would drink with it Eau de Libertas dry steen, Eau de Libertas Chenin dry steen. It was a cheap wine those days in a Burgundy bottle with a cork. Chenin was going there, and it was such an amazing wine.
Yeah.
But there was not a lot of love given to the varietal Chenin so much. So everybody did everyday house wine.
Yeah.
It was such a magnificent wine. The freshness in the wine was incredible.
Yeah.
And what the guys have done now, and you've got to give Ken Forrester complete credit for that. He drove that. He started up the Chenin train, and he's done very well with that. Yeah. And a lot of the young winemakers that are coming through now are using that as their foundation to put themselves out there. So I think it's a good stepping stone for the winemakers.
Amazing, excellent. What else have you got there? We've talked about Isabella. We've talked about Lawrence Camphor. Obviously,
so then on the red wine side, which is really where the Muratie main focus has always been, we used to make a little Pinot Noir because of the history.
Yeah.
But I have, after trying for 25 years, it is clear where we are, it's a little bit warmer, so it's not cool climate. So we make a little bit of Pinot. I still name it after George Paul Canitz, the artist, the bohemian man who made the first Pinot.
Yeah.
We make a small batch of that, but that will never be, I will never hoist that little flag and say, look at me, this is the best Pinot of Africa. All I can say is we are the first. It's a very nice wine if you serve it slightly chilled. It's like Pinot is meant to be like a ballerina.
Yeah.
I always tell the people our ballerina is not wearing slippers. She's got some Doc Martens on her feet. So it's a bit more gutsy, bit dark in color, but it's a lovely wine. I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
So we do a bit of Pinot, but our real focus then goes to the more noble varietals: Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, Shiraz. Those grapes, they love this area. So we make a little bit of a Merlot. We make a small batch of Merlot because I'm a Gemini and we are creative. We're always stupid people. We let's make this, let's make that. So we make a stunning Merlot, which is more, I would say, it's more classic in the style. It's not, Merlot is very misunderstood in South Africa. Some of the Merlots, unfortunately, don't show very well. They're green, herbaceous, and all that. Ours is actually bigger, rounder, alcohol of about 14, but it's got dark plum, hence chocolate. It's beautiful. And it's a very good building block for the Ancela van der Kaap that comes later on in the lineup.
Yeah.
So the Merlot are named after Alberta. Annemarie, who was the daughter of Canitz, she was actually the first woman in South Africa that owned a wine estate and was actively involved in the winemaking, where that's 1958.
Yeah.
So I've named the Merlot after her. It's beautiful. It's softer.
Wine. I've drunk that. I mean, when I was aged me a little bit, like 25 years ago, being down in your part of the world, and the Merlot, even back then, what you're producing was very memorable. Something that I always think back on as a Muratie staple. For me personally, I was like, I really enjoy it. It's a really good wine.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can see, it's very popular in the local sales in South Africa. It's people love it. So we do the Merlot, and then obviously our Cab Sav.
Yeah,
that is also, it's become, you might be aware, but Stellenbosch has sort of taken the flag of saying it is a Cabernet Sauvignon cab country. It's sort of taken the ownership of Cabernet Sauvignon, and I think that Muratie is definitely putting its little stake in the ground there for producing of the best cabs around. We've had some really good ratings with that. And we do with a cab, we do a very small reserve batch called the Martin Melck Reserve, and then Family Reserve, and then we do the standard Martin Melck. And that again, Martin, my ancestor, came out of the history, came from Prussia back in 1746, bought Muratie in 1763, and he created the absolute legacy here. He was Lutheran of faith. He built the first Lutheran church in South Africa under great duress. And he was a very big, successful man in the Cape. And he owned Elsenburg, the agricultural college. That was his first farm, Elsenburg. And then when he became really successful, he bought all the farms around here. So if you can look on a map, you will see Uitkyk, Kanonkop, Muratie, Delheim, Knorroek, Quinrock, all this he bought, gave it to his daughter, and the clan lived here for about 115 years. So, and I thought it'd be a great thing to make the Cabernet in memory of Martin Melck. So here we have the Reserve, which is a single vineyard, which is a bigger wine, all in brand new wood, brand new French oak, only French oak. That is a really big expensive wine. And then we have the normal Martin Melck Cab, which is made from 4 different blocks on the estate. And just as wonderful, maybe not as much wood, a bit more softer on the new wood component. And both those wines are really, really popular for the cab lovers. Then we do a small batch of Shiraz or Syrah, which we do. And here we've got a unique thing, is that it's a family reserve Syrah we make. I found a block on the estate in 1987, and in the old days they used to make port from this stuff. Right. Then I got a lot of people use the port in port. This block is a field blend, and I went and I realized, but there's something not right here. So I got the viticulturist in there, and we identified 1.9 of a hectare of Syrah vineyards alone. And they were planted in 1977. Wow. So they are about 48 years old now. So they are registered as a single vineyard, old vine, single vineyard block. And we make our small batch. It's like 2,500 bottles of this Syrah Reserve from that. And these old vines are planted at the foot of the mountain here. And as I said to someone yesterday, these old vines are quite special because the yield is not very high. Yeah, they are completely self-regulating in their fruit that they carry. Right. They check the weather profile and they plan accordingly. We think we know, but they know better, And we make the small batch from that. That's a reserve Syrah. And then that's basically on the red wines. aside. And then obviously as a curveball, I still make this dessert wine they're called the Prince, or the late bottled vintage port wine.
Yes, well, you're not allowed to use the word port anymore, are you?
No, so we use Cape Vintage.
Yes, yeah.
Or we have a small batch. We make 1,001 bottles of late bottled Cape Vintage.
Okay.
And that it's called the Senator. That's
Right.
named after Stanford, who bought Muratie. And his history is another classic story. And I've decided I have to give him an honor here. And so that's called the late bottled vintage, or the Senator.
Okay.
Senator is named after Colonel Stanford. So we do a small bit of dessert on the side there as well. And that's basically what we do.
Yeah.
What I did omit was, in those wines, what I've done is I've created I would not say an entry-level wine. It's above the entry-level wine. And that is what we call my surname being Melck, M-E-L-C-K. We call it the blended red, the Melck's blended red. That's our everyday drinking wine. So it'll be basically plan B of the Cab, the Merlot, the Shiraz.
Yeah.
That would not go to, first of all, to Ancella or to the varietals. It will go to the blended red. It's softer, it's more easily approachable, but it's all been in older barrels, so it has got a bit of wood on it, not overtly any wood, no oak chips, no substitutes, all from the estate. It's not that I go and buy in bulk wine and put a Muratie label on it. It's all from the estate, and that's why I think that the blended red really, really over delivers on what it has to offer.
For the price point.
Yeah.
That's your most accessible wine, right? That Melck blended red, from a price point perspective.
I always say to people, if you're having a barbecue, or I always say tongue in cheek, but if my mother-in-law had to come and visit, I serve the Melck's blended red, If I need to impress her, crack a deal or do a business thing, then I'll bring out Ancella van der Kaap and the Family Reserve ones, Yeah. But for everyday drinking, the blended red, for the price point, you cannot go wrong with it.
I'm looking on my other screen. I'm not being distracted by anything else. I've got your portfolio in front of me. I'm sort of going through it, and that's at that price point. It's a really accessible red, coming from in a state of such great reputation. So it's great. I haven't tried it yet. I'd love to. I'd love to. I actually do have a bottle of it. I haven't tried it yet, but I do look forward to that. I agree with you that Ancella van der Kaap water is phenomenal. That would be my impress somebody wine over a really good meal. So it's a really good range you've got there between those two. You still with me, Rijk? Might have lost you. You're back. I lost you there for like 10 seconds.
Yeah, maybe we get a little dip every now and then.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you for that, man. Talking through that range was amazing. Thank you. I think the folks that will be looking at this conversation we're having will get a really good rounded picture of what you're doing there from the wine perspective. So I really, really appreciate that. You've told me so much, Rijk. I kind of had a question at the end of our chat to say, is there something that we wouldn't be able to find on the internet or in a history book or some little nugget of information that nobody else would know? But I think you covered so much there that we might have checked that box or ticked that off. But in closing, I mean, is there anything that you wanted that you would try and encapsulate everything that is Muratie? Any sort of nugget that you would say is a takeaway is the one thing that is Muratie?
Yeah. Well, I saw there you mentioned something about unusual things about it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I can just give you. We are obviously very animal friendly here. So if you think of my German Shepherd who just passed away, his name was Frank Zappa.
Oh wow.
The female was called Stella Artois. My current German Shepherd crossed a golden retriever's name is Sid Vicious from the Sex Pistols.
Love it.
So all our dogs have muso names. I love my music. Sadly, don't play music, but I have music concerts on the farm. So in the summertime, I always provide a platform here for young, aspiring musicians to come and play. And it's become quite a popular destination for people to come and listen to music and to give youngsters a platform. And my choice of music is from anywhere from jazz to blues, Chet Baker to blues, proper blues. And it's what we do here. Music is one thing, absolutely, and the wine is secondary, and that's basically what we're all about here, is to keep it real. That's the main thing, is we want to keep it real. We really are custodians of this place, and the whole thing is I want people to visit us and not to feel threatened. I want them to come as inquisitive visitors to Muratie, but to leave as friends of the family, Muratie family. That's our intention now.
Amazing. I love that. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about pairing wine. It's not just about pairing with food, but it's pairing with the arts and music as well.
Yeah.
Which is very much, we're very similar in that way. I would love, it's if I ever have the opportunity to come to your estate, open a bottle of Unsullivan Carp, sit there and have some good, as you said, wholesome South African food and listen to some blues music. That sounds like nirvana.
No, that's awesome. Yeah.
So I look forward to hopefully making that reality. Rijk, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I will loop back with you in the coming days as I hear from my members and the folks that have seen this conversation. But thank you so much. This was
awesome.
Enjoy the rest of your day. And your voice hung out.
No, it's okay. There's a little scratch there, but it's cool. There's no problem. Yeah.
Thanks, Rijk. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for your time. Have a good week. Ciao, weekend. Yeah. Ciao. Bye.